Have you ever wondered why the man who seems so confident, so magnetically certain, can collapse into a fragile shell the moment you step beyond his carefully constructed walls? Behind the polished arrogance and practiced charm lives a wound so old it predates your arrival in his story. Carl Jung would say this wound is not yours to heal. It is a primordial fracture, seated in the earliest bond between mother and child, where love was entangled with neglect, adoration bound in the same breath as dismissal. The narcissist is not simply an egotist. He is a man exiled from his own heart, condemned to wander the labyrinth of himself in search of the mother who never fully saw him. To love such a man is to stand in the presence of an ancient hunger that devours every tender offering you place in his hands. You will find that no reassurance, no devotion, no radiant well of your empathy can ever fill the chasm carved by that first betrayal. The narcissist becomes a collector of feminine energy because somewhere in the dark chambers of his psyche, he still believes that the right woman might become the archetypal mother, she who nourishes without question, she who completes the unfinished story. Yet no lover can assume the mantle of that myth without losing herself to it. In his silent hours, he feels it, the small boy staring into the indifferent gaze of the mother whose love was conditional. The boy who learned that to be valued, he must perform. To be seen, he must wear a mask. To be loved, he must abandon himself. These lessons calcified into a persona of superiority, a brittle armor shielding a bottomless despair. And when you step close enough to touch the tender places beneath, you may awaken a fury he cannot explain. Your love is too much. Your love is never enough. This is the paradox that will break you if you do not learn to step away. Imagine the narcissus flower leaning over its reflection, enchanted by its own image. The myth is not about vanity but about self-estrangement. He is transfixed by what he can never possess, a complete, unbroken self. And when you gaze upon him with the sincerity of your heart, he tastes the echo of that impossible reunion. He will draw you in, intoxicated by your devotion, your softness, your faith that love can be redemptive. But he will also despise you for the reminder that he is not whole. That the wound persists. That he remains the abandoned child who could not command the mother's gaze. Perhaps you have felt it, the vertigo of trying to love someone who cannot receive love without suspicion. One moment he lifts you onto a pedestal so high you feel almost divine. The next, he punishes you for being human. In Jungian terms, you become an unwitting projection screen for the disowned shadow, his hidden terror of unworthiness. He projects the dark feminine onto you, the devouring, rejecting mother who must be conquered or escaped. And so the cycle begins. You are the savior, the destroyer, the angel, the betrayer. Never simply a woman, never simply yourself. You will notice how he craves intensity over intimacy. How he mistakes chaos for passion. His life unfolds as a theater of masks and mirrors, each lover a prop in his tragic attempt to rewrite the original wound. If you believe you can heal him, you will soon discover that you are merely enacting another variation of the same unresolved drama. You will lose yourself in the corridors of his psyche, chasing the phantom of a boy who cannot be reached. And the more you sacrifice, the more you will be accused of betrayal. Because in truth, no sacrifice can ever substitute for the love he was denied. This is the heartbreak of the empath, to sense the beauty in his soul while being consumed by the darkness he cannot face. To feel the hidden softness beneath his cruelty and believe that your tenderness can coax it into the light. But what would you think if I told you that this is not your burden to carry? That no amount of patience or devotion can mother a man back into wholeness? That to attempt it is to collude with his illusion, to become an accomplice to his self-betrayal? In the quiet hours of your own reflection, you must ask, who are you without the compulsion to heal what is not yours? What part of you believes that your worth depends on saving him from himself? Jung taught that the path to individuation requires us to withdraw our projections and face our own shadow. For the empath, that shadow often contains the longing to feel indispensable, the hidden fear that if you are not needed, you are not lovable. There is a silence that descends when you stop trying to rescue the man who cannot be rescued. A silence that tastes like grief and liberation all at once. In that hush, you begin to see the truth unclouded by longing. He does not want to be healed. He wants to be adored, worshipped, endlessly reflected in the clear pools of your devotion, so he does not have to face the emptiness beneath his performance. He would rather be consumed by the illusions of conquest and power than surrender to the vulnerability that true transformation requires. And here is the hardest truth: the boy he once was deserved love without condition. He deserved a mother who could hold his gaze without shame or disgust. But the man he has become has chosen the armor of grandiosity over the rawness of self-reckoning. To heal would mean dismantling the fortress he built stone by stone, brick by brick, against the memory of that first rejection. And though he hungers for your light, he fears it even more. Because your love threatens to unmask him. Your love reveals the fracture he cannot bear to acknowledge. Perhaps you have already glimpsed the moments when the mask slips. When his eyes glaze with a sorrow so pure it feels holy. When he confesses, in a trembling voice, that he feels unlovable, broken, hollow. In those moments, you may believe you are witnessing the breakthrough that will change everything. But soon the mask returns, as if conjured by some ancient reflex, and the spell is broken. He will deny the confession. He will accuse you of imagining it. He will punish you for daring to see the boy inside the man. Carl Jung knew that the psyche defends its wounds with ferocity. That to protect itself from annihilation, the ego will create elaborate mythologies, stories in which everyone else is to blame, stories in which the self remains untouchable. The narcissist's mythology is a fortress built upon a single premise: I will never be small again. I will never be dependent. I will never be at the mercy of another's love. And yet, this mythology is a prison, because it traps him in a perpetual state of hunger he cannot name. When you love a man like this, you are not simply loving a man. You are loving a centuries-old archetype, the wounded prince who will not leave the safety of his tower. He demands the devotion of a queen but offers no throne beside him. He desires your surrender but never your equality. He is searching for the absolution no woman can bestow, the absolution that can only come when he faces the shadow he has buried beneath 1,000 charming smiles. And you, the empath, feel the pull of this archetype in your marrow. You sense the hidden grace that flickers in him like a candle starved of oxygen. You remember the moments when his guard fell away, when he rested his head in your lap and let himself be small, if only for an hour. Those moments bind you to the illusion that your love is different, that your love will be the one that finally melts the ice around his heart. But the truth is, you are not seeing him as he is. You are seeing the boy he was and the man he might become if only he would surrender. You are seeing the unlived potential, the shadow of a possibility. This is where the deepest entanglement begins. Because your own shadow, the part of you that has learned to equate love with sacrifice, rises to meet his. You become the priestess in his private ritual of self-worship and self-loathing. You offer your time, your energy, your body, your tears. You believe that your suffering is proof of your devotion. That your endurance will someday earn you the love he withholds. But this, too, is a myth. A myth born of the same wound that keeps him trapped, the wound of believing that love must be earned through suffering. Stoic philosophy teaches that the only true freedom lies in self-mastery, in the refusal to be enslaved by the passions of others. Marcus Aurelius wrote that we must not let our happiness depend on the actions of another. Seneca warned that to tie our peace to another's whims is to give away our power. And here, in the quiet ache of your heart, you will feel the first stirrings of that freedom. The recognition that his darkness is not yours to heal. That you are not his mother, nor his redeemer, nor the final chapter of his unfinished story. You are simply a woman, worthy of a love that does not require you to disappear to prove it exists. A woman whose light deserves to shine for its own sake, not to fill the void in someone else's soul. There is a moment, somewhere between disillusionment and awakening, when the empath finally feels the unbearable fatigue of carrying someone else's sorrow. This moment arrives like a quiet implosion, the collapse of the last illusion that your love will be enough. You may feel as though you are betraying him by no longer believing in his potential, but in truth, you are only ceasing to betray yourself. For so long you have been the mirror in which he steadies his reflection, seeking confirmation of his power, his desirability, his worth. Every look in your eyes was a salve for the wound he never dared to touch. And yet, no matter how brightly you shone, he could never see anything but his own haunted image. This is the tragedy of the narcissist's mother wound, the belief that no external gaze can truly sanctify the self. It is a wound that says, if my mother could not love me as I was, no one else ever will. And so he performs. He seduces. He conquers. He abandons. All in a ceaseless attempt to outrun the terror that perhaps he was unworthy of love from the very beginning. To understand this is to glimpse the sorrow that lives beneath the cruelty, the shame that hums beneath the arrogance. But understanding is not the same as rescuing. Compassion is not the same as surrender. Carl Jung warned that when we identify with the archetype of the Savior, we invite the shadow into our lives by the back door. What begins as a noble desire to heal becomes an unconscious compulsion to merge with another's suffering. You may tell yourself you are strong enough to carry both your pain and his. That your heart was made to transmute his darkness into light. But each time you excuse the coldness, each time you rationalize the cruelty, you teach your nervous system to tolerate the intolerable. You teach your soul that love must come at the cost of your own wholeness. He senses this, whether he admits it or not. He senses that you will bend to contain his rage, that you will shrink to avoid his contempt. And this becomes its own addiction, the knowledge that someone will sacrifice their sanity to preserve the illusion that he is not broken. He will not say this aloud. He may not even be fully aware of it. But he will test your devotion in 1,000 silent ways, watching to see how much of yourself you are willing to burn to keep him warm. Sometimes, he will wrap his wounds in poetic confessions. He will say he has never trusted anyone as he trusts you. That you are the only one who has ever truly seen him. And in those tender admissions, you will feel the old ache, the hope that this time, it will be different. That this time, your love has cracked something open. But what you must see is that confession without action is just another seduction, another performance to keep you invested in the fantasy. The man who is ready to heal does not simply confess his wounds, he chooses to face them. He humbles himself before the truth of his own brokenness. He does the work of unraveling the story that his worth depends on dominance and control. But the man who still worships the mask will take your empathy and twist it into another means of self-escape. He will let you believe that you are the exception, that you have been chosen to do what no woman before you could accomplish. And in that belief, you will lose yourself piece by piece. Marcus Aurelius taught that we are complicit in our own suffering when we fail to set boundaries around our hearts. He wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." And here is where your liberation begins, not in changing him, but in changing the thoughts that keep you tethered to his story. The thought that you are responsible for his redemption. The thought that your love is not real unless it is proven through sacrifice. The thought that being chosen by a broken man will somehow complete you. You are not his healer. You are not the final incarnation of the perfect mother he has sought in every woman. You are a sovereign being, entrusted with your own soul. And when you remember this, you will find that his approval loses its power to define you. You will see that your desire to be needed was never love, it was a remnant of your own unhealed wounds. The places where you learned that love meant disappearing. When you reclaim those parts of yourself, you reclaim your freedom. And no man's emptiness can steal it from you again. The slow unraveling of this illusion is as tender as it is brutal. There is no single instant when the spell breaks, it dissolves in stages, like fog lifting at dawn. First comes the clarity that his suffering predates you by decades, that it is the echo of a mother's absence no lover can replace. Then comes the quiet recognition that your own compulsion to heal him was never entirely selfless, it was the ache to prove your worth by achieving what others could not. And finally, there is the most difficult revelation of all, that even your most radiant love cannot transform a man who refuses to surrender his mask. In Jung's language, this mask is a persona, an elaborate fiction the ego constructs to conceal the shadow beneath. The narcissist's persona is a monument to his own denied longing. It is the charismatic certainty that draws you in, the bravado that intoxicates, the relentless insistence that he does not need anyone. But behind it crouches the wounded boy, still hoping that if he performs well enough, if he captivates enough hearts, he might finally deserve to be held. This is why no amount of sacrifice will satisfy him. Because no woman can mother him into wholeness. The archetype he pursues is an impossible fantasy, a perfect feminine presence who will see his deepest wounds, forgive them all, and never ask anything in return. He demands the impossible because to face the truth would mean acknowledging that the wound will never be undone by another's devotion. It can only be faced alone, in the dark, without the armor of seduction. You may find yourself replaying the moments when he let you glimpse his softness, when his voice grew small and trembling, when his eyes brimmed with the sorrow of 1,000 unmet needs. You will remember how your heart surged with a ferocious tenderness, how you believed that this moment was proof he trusted you more than he had ever trusted anyone. But the truth is more sobering. Those glimpses were fragments of a self he does not yet have the courage to inhabit. They were fleeting and unanchored, like dreams upon waking. When you understand this, you stop blaming yourself for failing to save him. You see that the problem was never your lack of love. It was that his emptiness cannot be filled by any woman's offering. The mother wound is a fracture in the foundation of the psyche. It cannot be repaired by external validation. It cannot be healed by erratic worship or unconditional acceptance. It is a journey of self-reconciliation he must one day undertake, should he ever summon the humility to do so. And you, who have spent sleepless nights searching his face for signs of awakening, must face your own shadow. The part of you that equates martyrdom with intimacy. The part that confuses being indispensable with being loved. The part that would rather bleed than be abandoned. For as long as you remain ensnared by this compulsion, you will find yourself drawn to men who cannot meet you in the light of mutual respect. You will continue to confuse the intensity of entanglement with the steadiness of devotion. Seneca wrote that the man who depends upon another's regard for his happiness is like a slave who wears golden chains, more beautiful perhaps, but no less enslaved. And so it is for the empath who binds her worth to the impossible project of redeeming the narcissist. You may call it love, but in truth it is bondage. You may call it devotion, but it is self-abandonment in disguise. There is a nobility in loving a wounded soul, but nobility is not the same as wisdom. Wisdom knows when to extend compassion and when to walk away. Wisdom understands that no connection is worth the price of your dignity. Wisdom whispers that your longing to save him is a mirror of the same emptiness you seek to deny. And when you can hear that whisper without shame, you will have taken the first step toward your own individuation. In the quiet after you leave, you will discover a space you had forgotten. The space where your own needs, desires, and dreams can unfurl without apology. You will see that your worth was never contingent upon being chosen by a man too frightened to choose himself. You will feel the lightness of no longer holding the burden of someone else's healing. And in that lightness, you will remember who you were before his wound became your purpose. When the final veil lifts, you will stand alone in a silence so pure it almost frightens you. This is the hour when you face the truth you tried to postpone. The man you loved was never fully here. He was always half-turned toward the past, searching the horizon for the mother who vanished behind her own wounds. And no matter how fiercely you offered your heart, it was never his to claim, because he was never truly present to receive it. There is an agony in that recognition, a cold clarity that seeps into your bones. For a time, you may feel as though your love was wasted, that every sacrifice was a gesture into the void. But slowly, as the hours pass without his voice in your ear, you will begin to see it differently. You will understand that love is never wasted, not even when it is unreciprocated, not even when it fails to transform the one you gave it to. Because love is not merely what you offer to another. It is also the evidence of your own capacity to feel, to care, to hope. It is a testament to your own depth. And this depth will become the seed of your rebirth. Carl Jung spoke of individuation as a descent into the underworld of the self, a confrontation with all that has been hidden, denied, or disowned. To love the narcissist is to embark on such a descent, though you may not recognize it at first. Each humiliation, each dismissal, each cycle of idealization and devaluation is an initiation into your own shadow. You are forced to ask the questions that terrify you most. Why do I stay where I am not cherished? What part of me believes I must be useful to be worthy? Who am I without the project of his redemption? These questions are the keys that unlock the prison you never knew you inhabited. They are the invitation to reclaim every fragment of yourself you traded away in the hope that he would finally see you. You begin to realize that it was never your task to be the architect of his healing. It was your task to learn that your worth does not depend on the suffering you are willing to endure. There is a softness that returns when you stop bracing for the next wound. A gentleness that comes back into your breath when you no longer have to translate contempt into misunderstood affection. You feel it most acutely in the quiet hours, when you no longer have to perform the role of the inexhaustible nurturer. You can simply be a woman with her own fears and desires, her own unmet needs, her own secret longings that deserve to be honored. This is where your power is reborn. Not in the certainty that you will never again be tempted by the wounded prince, but in the awareness that you can choose differently. That you can recognize the signs of his hunger masquerading as love. That you can feel compassion without forfeiting your boundaries. That you can honor his humanity without surrendering your own. And when you look back, perhaps months or years from now, you will see the strange blessing hidden inside this crucible. For all its sorrow, it forced you to confront the parts of yourself that were still seeking validation through sacrifice. It showed you where you still believed that you must disappear to be adored. It revealed the echo of your own childhood wounds, the places where you learned to confuse abandonment with love. And in this revelation, you will find the power to create a new story. A story in which you are no longer the savior or the mirror. A story in which you are no longer a passive witness to someone else's self-destruction. A story in which your love is an offering, not a transaction. You will no longer spend your nights wondering if you are enough for the man who is never satisfied. You will no longer measure your value by the intensity of your suffering. You will no longer barter your peace for the crumbs of affection that fall from a table you were never invited to share. Seneca said that no man is free who is a slave to his passions. But there is another kind of bondage, more insidious, the enslavement to another's unhealed pain. When you step beyond that bondage, you step into a vastness you once feared. The vastness of your own autonomy, your own wholeness, your own unclaimed joy. And from this place of quiet sovereignty, you will finally see the wound he carries as it truly is, ancient, bottomless, and not yours to heal. In the end, there is no dramatic closure with a man who has spent his life perfecting the art of escape. There will be no moment when he stands before you, contrite and humbled, offering an apology worthy of your devotion. If you wait for such a reckoning, you will wait until your own spirit has withered from neglect. The narcissist's wound is a vortex, and the longer you orbit its pull, the more you forget the contours of your own soul. You may still dream of him sometimes. You may remember the softness in his voice when he whispered his confessions, the hunger in his eyes as he reached for you in the darkness. Those memories are dangerous because they disguise themselves as proof of intimacy. But you must remember that longing is not the same as love. That desperation is not the same as connection. The man you knew was never fully present in those moments. He was always a fugitive, hiding behind the mask of his charm. In Jungian psychology, the narcissist is an archetype of the pure eternus, the eternal boy who refuses the initiatory trials of adulthood. He remains a child in a man's body, determined to bend every relationship to the unfinished business of his past. His lovers become substitutes for the mother he cannot confront, symbols to be conquered or punished for the wounds she left behind. This is why no act of devotion will ever soften him. You could offer your life upon the altar of his longing, and still he would find a way to blame you for the emptiness he carries. And what of you? The empath who feels every subtle tremor of his pain? The woman who has been told all her life that her highest virtue is her capacity to endure? It is here, in the raw place where your compassion collides with your self-preservation, that your own shadow waits. You will have to confront the part of you that feels safer in chaos than in the unfamiliar calm of being loved well. The part that finds purpose in sacrifice. The part that would rather be needed than cherished. This is the unspoken inheritance of your own story. Perhaps you, too, were the child who learned that love was something you had to earn. That to be seen, you had to be indispensable. That your worth was measured by the burdens you could carry without complaint. And so you became fluent in the language of other people's needs, even as you forgot how to name your own. It is no accident that you found each other. His hunger met your compulsion like two magnets colliding in the dark. And for a while, it felt like destiny. But what you called fate was only a reenactment, a ritual repeating itself across time until one of you became conscious enough to end it. Marcus Aurelius taught that the quality of our lives is determined by the quality of our thoughts. When you find yourself haunted by memories of him, remember this: your thoughts are not commandments. They are echoes of old patterns. You do not have to obey them. You do not have to slip back into the dream that your suffering is proof of your love. Instead, you can choose the unfamiliar path. The one where you belong to yourself first. Where you do not bend to win affection. Where you do not shrink to soothe another's fear. Where you do not mistake intensity for devotion or chaos for passion. You can choose the stillness of a life that does not revolve around a man who cannot meet you in the light of your own wholeness. And yes, it will feel lonely at first. There will be mornings when you wake with the ache of absence, when you wonder if you made a mistake by walking away. But in time, you will see that the loneliness is not a punishment. It is the space where something new can grow, something that was never possible while you were consumed by the task of saving him. You will begin to feel your own aliveness returning in small, almost imperceptible ways. The laughter that bubbles up without effort. The pleasure of an evening spent in your own company, no longer weighed down by the dread of his withdrawal. The quiet joy of knowing that you are no longer living in someone else's story. And slowly, you will realize that you have become the woman he could never destroy. The woman whose worth is unassailable, whose spirit is sovereign, whose love is no longer an offering to be devoured. You will come to see that his darkness was never as alluring as you once believed. It only appeared seductive because it mirrored the hidden places within you that longed to be redeemed. The longing you felt was never truly about him, it was about the unfinished story you carried inside yourself. The story that told you love must be a crucifixion. That to be worthy, you must bleed. In the quiet that follows the ending, you may feel a kind of emptiness you cannot easily name. This emptiness is the absence of the role you played, the savior, the confessor, the forgiving witness to his pain. Without that role, you are left with only yourself, unadorned and unneeded. And yet this is where true freedom waits, and the willingness to stand alone without the narcotic of someone else's dependence. Carl Jung understood that individuation is not an ascent into perfection but a descent into the underworld of the self. It is the process of reclaiming every disowned fragment, every abandoned truth. And here, in the aftermath of loving a man who could not love you back, you will meet the most exiled part of your own psyche, the part that believed you were never enough on your own. The part that was willing to trade everything, peace, dignity, joy, for the chance to be chosen. This part of you is not an enemy. It is a wounded child who learned that love was a currency to be earned. When you finally meet her with compassion rather than shame, you will understand why you were drawn to the man who embodied your earliest lessons. He was a mirror reflecting the belief that you must become indispensable to be worthy. That you must vanish inside his needs to deserve affection. That you must be everything so that you never again feel like nothing. And yet, even as you see this, you will notice something else stirring within you, a quiet rebellion against that old story. You will feel the first stirrings of a self no longer willing to be defined by anyone's hunger. A self that refuses to be consumed. A self that remembers it is already whole. This is not a revelation that comes all at once. It unfolds slowly, like dawn washing over a dark landscape. There will still be days when you feel the old ache, when your heart longs for the rush of intensity he brought into your life. You may still dream of the way he looked at you, as if you were the only source of light he could see. And in those moments, you must be gentle with yourself. To crave what is familiar is human. To confuse the drama of a broken love with purpose is understandable. But each time you return to yourself instead of to him, you strengthen the roots of a new way of being. Stoic philosophy teaches that true peace is found in the mastery of the self. Epictetus wrote that no one can harm you without your consent, that it is not the actions of others that wound us most, but our own attachment to them. When you begin to loosen your grip on the story of his redemption, you will discover this peace for yourself. It is not the peace of certainty or perfect detachment. It is the peace of knowing that you are no longer enslaved to the illusion that you can heal what was never yours to heal. Perhaps the greatest paradox is that in releasing him, you finally honor the part of you that tried so desperately to save him. You honor the sincerity of your love, the depth of your compassion. You honor the courage it took to hope that your tenderness could be transformative. And you honor the wisdom that finally rose within you, the wisdom that whispered, "Enough." There is a sacredness in this ending that no one else will ever fully understand. It is the sacredness of returning to your own life after wandering for so long in someone else's labyrinth. It is the relief of no longer needing to decode the silences, to soothe the rages, to fill the emptiness that was never your responsibility. And when the memories come, when you remember the way his voice could make your heart tremble, the way his touch could ignite your skin, you will not deny them. You will simply breathe and let them pass, knowing that they are echoes, not invitations. This is what it means to reclaim yourself, to stand in the aftermath of longing without reaching for the familiar chains. To let the emptiness be a clearing where something truer can take root. One day you will wake up and realize that your heart no longer races at the thought of his return. That the stories you once clung to have lost their gravity. The spell has been broken not by his transformation but by your own. You will see him clearly, at last, not as the tragic prince or the misunderstood genius, but simply as a man, lost in the labyrinth of his own making. And you will no longer feel the urge to follow him there. This clarity is not born of bitterness. It is born of the quiet acceptance that everyone must face their own darkness in their own time. You can love someone with your entire soul and still recognize that their path does not belong beside yours. You can grieve the dream of what could have been and still honor the reality of what is. This is the maturity Jung called individuation, the integration of shadow and light, longing and truth, desire and wisdom. When you stop trying to heal him, you reclaim the energy you once spent on his absolution. This energy is not lost, it returns to you in unexpected ways. In the softness of your own breath, no longer held tight against the dread of his rejection. In the lightness of evenings that are yours alone, free from the obligation to mend what he refuses to touch. In the slow rediscovery of pleasures you abandoned while you were busy tending to his emptiness. The woman you are becoming does not confuse her worth with her capacity to endure. She no longer performs devotion as a means to prove her lovability. She does not shrink to fit the hollows of a man who cannot stand in the fullness of her radiance. This woman is dangerous in the most holy way, dangerous because she has nothing left to prove, no illusions left to protect. She no longer fears the silence of her own company. She no longer mistakes someone else's longing for her own. And so the man who could not be healed becomes something else in your story, a teacher you did not choose, an initiation you did not anticipate. Through the agony of loving him, you were forced to confront your own hidden places, the part of you that believed love was earned through suffering, the part that was terrified to stand alone, the part that thought it needed to be everything to be enough. Seneca wrote that sometimes even to live is an act of courage. And there is no greater act of courage than to choose yourself when everything in you has been trained to choose another. To turn away from the drama that once defined you and step into the quiet of your own becoming. To walk unaccompanied into the unknown and trust that you will find yourself there, intact and more honest than ever before. You will look back on this chapter and see that it was never about saving him. It was about reclaiming the parts of yourself you abandoned in your quest to be chosen. It was about seeing the mirror he offered you, not a mirror of your unworthiness, but of the wounds you were finally ready to heal within yourself. You will bless the lessons and release the man. You will remember him without rancor or regret. He was simply the one who showed you where you were still asleep. And now, you are awake. You will no longer chase the approval of a man who feeds on your doubt. You will no longer surrender your softness to someone who uses it as proof of their own importance. You will no longer barter your dignity for the illusion of belonging. Instead, you will stand rooted in your own knowing, unshaken by his absence, unmoved by the familiar temptation to rescue what is not yours. This is the quiet triumph no one else will see, the woman who no longer needs to be everything to be worthy of love. The woman who can look into her own reflection and find enoughness there, without anyone else's permission. The woman who is finally free. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.